Hello and welcome to Cry, Laugh, Eat, Making Friends with Your Emotions. It's wonderful to have you with us. My name is Helen.
Talofa lover, this is Ruth. Welcome to our podcast. We're so glad you could join us today. And today we are looking, like we do every week, at emotions in everyday life. So we just take simple situations that most of us experience, at very least the emotion, and we explore it and we look at how that emotion is your friend. Well, most of you know that Helen and I are the best of friends, that we just love each other and we're like sisters. And if there was another relationship, you could describe it as we're more than sisters.
Twins.
Something like that, yes. But it's interesting because this morning we had an experience where I felt some resentment towards Helen.
Fancy that. How could she do that?
And it actually affected the way that I was behaving towards her. Now, initially she didn't feel it, which of course makes you more annoyed and more offended. And so I just carried on in silence until we reached home, which is where we work from. And then I sat there and I actually spoke to Helen about this feeling that I was having, because it's difficult to work with people closely when you're not feeling very, what's the word, Helen?
Connected, and I guess there's a wall up when there's something like that, isn't there?
Yes, that's it exactly. That's it exactly. So basically, our episode today is about resentment.
And in talking about resentment, in our discussion together, we realise how resentment can so easily sneak in. I mean, for me, myself as well. And it often comes from a need that we have that we might not even realise until it's not met. Mm-hmm. And that's then when the resentment can sneak in. But in talking about it together, we were able to see how easily that snuck in and how there was a real need. And it was really easily fixed because we talked about it. That doesn't diminish the need. It shares the need between two friends. And why we want to talk about it today is that we understand when you can process that resentment fairly quickly, you can move through it just as quickly, and it can actually strengthen friendship, not leave a scar or a chunk or a hole in it. That's what we're going to explore today, isn't it, Ruth? All about different aspects of resentment.
And even how it can be a friend, which is weird when you think about it, because resentment is such a negative feeling. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so speaking of negative feelings, let's first of all define what resentment is so that we're all on the same page.
A first part of the definition of resentment is that resentment is a feeling of displeasure or anger towards someone or something that you believe has treated you unfairly.
Oh, so that must have been what I was feeling this morning, Helen. You're treating me unfairly.
Oh, how rude. Yeah, and sometimes we can be doing that without even knowing. And that's the whole
treating
thing.
people unfairly or feeling resentment?
Both, actually, because sometimes we don't realise that our reaction to something can hurt another person. That reaction might be silent, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Sometimes we're really unaware. And yes, we are often unaware of our own building resentment. What I loved about you this morning is you caught it so quickly, processed it and talked about it.
Well, I was actually shocked that I was harbouring a resentment. That's what blew me away this morning when I was thinking about it while you were in Woolworths shopping.
Yeah. And I loved it because you took that time. I think that was the perfect example of how an emotion became a friend to you and helped you process it enough that we could then talk about it.
And we'll talk about that shortly.
Some more, yeah. So there's another part that you're going to share what resentment means.
Yes, resentment's like holding on to a grudge about a past situation or hurt. You often feel upset or bitter when you think about it. Mm-hmm. Oh, and as I listen to these definitions, I know that everyone has experienced some form of resentment. everyone.
Course.
It's very natural. And just because you feel resentment doesn't mean that you stop loving someone.
No.
Because I love Helen to bits, but I still felt resentment.
Yeah, and resentment, if we're not aware of it, resentment can linger for a long time and might affect how you interact with others and how you feel about yourself. And I remember a story of a lady that I know. After doing a workshop, she shared with me that she had held resentment to her father for 50 years.
50 years.
Is such a long time. And I guess something that was said in the workshop made her realize, I want to let go of this. And then only just recently she shared with me how she's let go of it and then realized that the resentment she held, in that resentment she'd made a story that he didn't love her. And she realized when she looked back that that actually wasn't true. And she had determined that he didn't love her because he wasn't home very much.
He was busy working and providing for them.
That's right. When she looked at his life more, she realized the things that he was doing were for his family. A big realization, but a long time for that resentment to sit there. So we hope that as we talk today, we can help you to see any resentments that you have and us in ourselves too, and not let them fester in us.
So I guess a good place to start is, where does resentment come from? As in, what emotion, what core emotion is resentment part of? It's part of anger. And what does anger notify us of? If you look in our book, and if you haven't got a copy, please buy one. But in our book,
anger says, I am here to alert you when something is unfair or wrong.
Okay, so it notifies you, of course, when something, like Helen said, is unfair or unjust or wrong. So that's really straightforward. Resentment essentially is a notification that someone or something has treated you unfairly, that you're feeling not heard, you're feeling an injustice against you. So one of the things that shocked me this morning is that I didn't know that there was a little weed of resentment within me. So how do we know if we're harbouring resentment? Because it's not always obvious, is it, Helen?
No. And there's the great question that you came up with to how do we know that we have it? And the question is, have I changed how I act or feel towards this person? Was I feeling differently before this incident happened?
And did you sense it from me this morning, Helen?
I sensed there was something different about you. I hadn't picked up at what it was. I knew there was something happening.
Okay. So I was really lucky in a way because I'm very aware of how I'm feeling. So I was able to feel, I guess, that annoyance or that offence or whatever you want to call it, that resentment before it developed into something more.
When we are feeling something different towards someone that we usually love quite easily, there's a telltale sign that something's happening inside. And that's when we can pause and have a look at what that is, which is what Ruth did this morning. I love that question. How do we know when we have resentment? Well, you'll feel something inside that's not what you normally feel. Let's have a look. Our resentment can grow and grow and grow if we let it, if we don't catch it early. It's like a weed. And you picture a weed in a garden, one of those weeds that just slowly takes over the garden and chokes the flowers. Well, when resentment is in us, it can grow and start wrapping around our heart and other parts of us. Some people have it for years, and that can then change who you are and certainly changes how you act towards other people. But if we're not careful, it'll choke us, that resentment. Also, sometimes resentment starts, I know it does for me, when I've interpreted someone else's actions or lack of actions and I give it a story. That doesn't diminish that there was some hurt initially that I need to think about. But when we let resentment stay in us, a story will grow, and it will grow and it will grow if it stays there for a long time. and it will get embellished, and eventually it can become like a movie inside of you, this big whole story that can get quite dramatic because it just keeps building.
And what started off as the neighbour who never waved to you, 20 years later, she's an axe murderer.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a bit dramatic, but you get
that's
the
what
gist.
I mean.
You
See,
get the gist
stories
of it.
become dramatic. But they do, because we tend to build on them and we have needs, and then our eyes start seeing more things and interpreting more things that perhaps are never really that.
Yeah, so inaccurate. Your vision changes because it's in your face and you can't see clearly.
That's right. And I believe it's usually linked to a need you have inside you that you don't feel's being fulfilled. So it's so important to catch that resentment. And we're going to explore now.
To spray the weed.
Yeah, to spray that weed and catch it before it grows.
And takes over.
And perhaps what we're about to talk about now will help you know how to do that.
So remember that resentment is anger-based. If anger is a friend to you, the kind of friend that would actually sit beside you and say, you need to respect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You need to respect yourself. So what do we mean by that? Well, let's take a quote from our book, From Anger, who says, quote, I am the emotion in your heart that makes you care, value, and defend. So I'm going to say that again. I'm the emotion in your heart that makes you care, value, and defend.
So when we think about that quote...
There's three important words in that quote, isn't there?
Yeah.
Care, value, defend. So what does that mean in relation to anger being a friend? It's telling us care, value, and defend. But what does it mean when you are feeling resentful or angry in any form?
Well, my thoughts are, I loved how you said anger would say you need to respect yourself. We also need to care about ourselves and look for what is going on here? What is this that I'm feeling, and why am I feeling it? You need to know that because there's something that you're needing. And I believe that's respecting yourself. Just pausing like you did as you waited for me in the supermarket, pausing to think about what's going on. Why am I feeling like this? And that's caring and respecting yourself and your values.
And it's also, I think, respect for the other person.
Absolutely. I've pondered that as we were talking about preparing this episode. I observe in me that when I feel resentment come, it's like it sits right at the front of my face. And then the love and respect I might have for someone, I won't say it diminishes, but it's certainly not the focus. And it's almost like I put that aside and have a good look at the resentment. And it's like, well,
it becomes the focus.
It becomes the focus, and it does push aside the love and the respect that I would normally have for that person. That's where I think care and value come in. So if I can bring that back in and go, okay, I love and really value this person on any other day. So what is going on now? Why am I feeling this? And what do I need to do about this? Is this just a conversation? Or is this hurt real that I feel? And what can I do? Do I need to just have a conversation? Hey, that really hurt. Or it's, for me, then it becomes quite achievable how to fix it. But if I was to stay in that resentment, it's like I said before, a little movie's going to grow in my head. Oh, yes, and that's right. They did that last time. So it must mean this time. And yeah, it's not healthy. It really is not a healthy place to stay. But like I think you said earlier, we're not bad because it comes. That's natural. We're just human. It's what we do with it, isn't it? The third word of that quote from Anger from our book was defend. It said care, value, and defend. And I believe defend is a good thing when it comes from a place of peace, calm, and thoughtful consideration, because sometimes we can be in a defensive state where we're just reacting to other people.
And this reminds us again of anger as that friend that says you need to respect.
Yes.
So the respect goes two ways.
Yeah.
Anger in our book on page 52 says, I am not here to crush you or others, but to empower.
I love that. That goes perfectly with defend. So if we're just defending our values, our caring, respecting ourselves and respecting the other person, that's perfect, because it's not crushing, it's not crushing or disempowering someone else, because that's not healthy. So just to wind up our episode for this week, we want to leave you with this little thought. Remember, don't let the weed of resentment choke you.
Ooh. And on that happy note, we'll wish you farewell and invite you to join us next week when we have our special guest. Forgotten his name.
That's how special he is.
He's my favourite.
His name is Daniel.
That's right.
And we love him to pieces.
Love you, Daniel. Okay, see you all next week, and thanks again for joining us. Bye.
Bye. Take care. So, yeah, love that you brought that last quote in. Ruth. Sorry. I was just hearing myself go, I love how you brought that in. Sorry.